Karri, take one. Selling a company is typically the single most significant financial event of an individual's lifetime. So before you embark on a process, it's really important to understand what the individual objectives and motivations of the seller are. Now, you could be either a founder, a family, or an individual shareholder. So it's really important to understand who you are and what those objectives are. You could be looking to pass the business on to the next generation, pass it on to the management team, to preserve the culture, or indeed just to maximize the price. Very often a combination of all of these things. So if you're looking for a full exit, there's effectively three options that you've got. You could sell to a strategic, where you've really got to think about the culture, and you've got to think about the synergies which drive the price. You could sell to private equity, but the key thing to bear in mind there is management. You need a management team that the private equity firm can back in order to sell to a private equity firm. The final option you've got here is to sell to your employees, which particularly in the UK, there are some incredible tax breaks for doing. Now, some people may wish to stay on with the business and just take some cash off the table through a liquidity event. So there again, you could sell to a strategic, you can sell a minority stake or a majority stake and have an option for the rest in the future. You could sell to PE, and this is really what private equity is designed for, where they're backing you for the next 3 to 5 year period. Typically, you can take about 50% of the proceeds off the table and you roll the rest into the new structure. A really simple option you've got is just to take on board some debt. Typically quite low cost of capital, not so tax efficient, but you can pay it out as a dividend to yourself. The final option that a lot of companies don't consider, but many companies actually could benefit from, is to IPO the business if they're of the right size and in the right sector. So here at IMAP, before we embark on a process, we like to really understand what are the motivations of our clients and design a bespoke process specifically for them. So as we embark on a process, first we need to prepare the company. There's some really key factors that we need to take into account. Understanding the tax implication is probably the most crucial one, because that can really cause problems later down the line in a transaction. Preparing all your financial materials. These need to be ready and in a state that can be presented to a prospective buyer so that there aren't any questions that arise from there. Communicating with your management team, absolutely critical. They need to have the same objectives as yours. They need to be bought in to what you're doing so that you get a successful transaction. You'd be surprised at how many small and medium-sized companies may have some customer relationships that aren't documented or signed contracts. Getting all of these in place before you embark on the process is crucial. An interesting development over the last decade or so is the use of vendor due diligence. This is where the due diligence is done upfront and then passed on to the prospective buyers, which gives much more certainty and a tighter timeline, and you're front-ending some of the work that would otherwise appear at the back end, and you put all of your bidders on a level playing field. Finally, timing is really important to consider. You might, for example, be in an election year, or you might have some really big prospective customer wins coming up, and you want to make sure that you're timing those to perfection with when you launch your process. So, depending on the company, all of this could take anywhere from 1 to up to 6 months. But doing it properly up front is critical because it makes the rest of the process so much more successful. So having prepared the business for sale, we move on to the marketing phase. This is the real dark art of what we as advisors do. This is where we create the value. How do we do that? It's by positioning the equity story, so really demonstrating what makes you as a company different and better, making sure we use the right KPIs, the right positioning, the right benchmarking against other companies in your sector. Also critical is access and relationship to the right audience of buyers. Are they strategics? Are they PE? Are they domestic? Are they international? Making sure that we understand their reasons for buying you and how we position the story specifically for those buyers. Finally, as we mentioned, every vendor's motivations are different, and we bespoke the process to make sure that we have everything taken into account, of whether that be management bandwidth, whether you want to run an auction process, or sometimes you might want to go for a more bilateral approach. So having crafted the right equity story, and approach the right buyers, we move on to the closing phase. This is where we secure the value that we found in the marketing phase. Here we look at what the structure of the transaction is. Is it all paid up front? Is there a deferral? Is there an earnout? What are the terms and the triggers for that earnout? We also look at the legal terms. There might be leaver provisions in place. There might be swamping rights, almost certainly will be on a private equity deal. The warranties and indemnities. These are ones that are very, very carefully negotiated to make sure that nothing comes to bite you after the transaction. There might even be different classes of equity and understanding how those operate. Then the closing mechanism. You could go for a locked box, or you could go for more traditional completion accounts. Both have their merits and their demerits. So, if you've understood your objectives before launching into the transaction, if you've prepared thoroughly, if you've crafted the right equity story and we've gone out to the right buyers for you, and if you've understood what the key terms are and we've secured that value in place for you, you're well on your way to a really successful transaction. So if you want to learn more about selling your business, visit our site for more videos like this.